How's it going, everyone? I am the Shaz here with a video going over the events for the month of November on the All-Stars global server. All of the events that I am going to list would have come, if the global schedule had not accelerated, in the month of December. As with all of these preview videos, I do want to emphasize that I am working off of the JP schedule of events, so some things may come in a slightly different order than what happened on JP. The end of the month may also look very different, but we'll get into that at the end of the video. This video is going to be a long one, so grab a cup of water, a light snack, and let's get started. At the beginning of the month, we get the Detective Yohane exchange event, which I called the Yohane Holmes event on JP. The event UR is Yohane 5, the event SRs are Wonderful Rush Ellie and Love You My Friends Ayumu, and the Gacha URs are Pana 5 and Kanata 3, with the Gacha SR being Koi Aqua Kanan. The voltage ranking songs for this event are Yume no Tobira, Thrilling One Way, and Telepathy. The temporary song, starting on this event, is Kaware Yasuki by Guilty Kiss. As far as the actual event goes, this is the first event where the drop rates were changed. Event SRs start with a 7% additional item drop rate, and the event UR starts with a 15% additional item drop rate. The Gacha URs came with a 20% additional item drop rate, and the Gacha SR came with a 12% drop rate. The change also affected limit breaks, as the first limit break increased the drop rate by 5%, then gave diminishing returns of 4, 3, 2, and finally 1% additional drops for each additional limit break. In total, if you wanted to max limit break all event cards in the Gacha cards, you gained an additional 169% in drops. Before you ask, yes, this change in rates affects marathon events as well, so tiering for marathon events going forward is going to see less max limit break cards, but generally higher scores overall for the top 100 and higher. And for those of you wanting to tier this event, I hope you have a lot of gems saved up. On JP, this event had the highest score to reach top 100, coming in at 3.1 million event points needed, which equates out to over 3,500 plays on Advanced Plus over the course of the 9-day event. The event UR is Yohane 5, or as I like to call her, Yohane Holmes. Like most event cards, this one is pretty forgettable. Even if you do tier high enough to get a second copy of her, at Limit Break 1, she is essentially a worse version of Honoka's first UR. Same attribute and typing, less appeal, equal stamina, slightly higher technique. Their tap actives are similar, but where Honoka reduces damage by a maximum of 14% for the next 10 notes, Yohane can reduce up to 26% of damage taken for the next 5 notes, with both abilities activating at a 33% rate. Honoka has the much better passive, boosting stamina of all cards except herself by a maximum of 5.2%. Whereas Yohane can only boost the same amount of stamina of same attribute cards. The main point of difference comes in their live show actives. Honoka 1 can heal for a portion of her own stamina at the beginning of an appeal chance, but Yohane Holmes has a chance, if activated at the beginning of a live, to reduce damage taken by 2% for the remainder of the live. The trend doesn't get any better with the event SRs. Wonderful Rush Ellie is a guard type card that you can use for Dream Live Parade, but that's about it. This card suffers from a bad tap active, a weak passive, and a live show active that doesn't really matter to many of you. Love You My Friends Ayumu is a decent voltage type SR for an event card, but suffers from relatively weak voltage and a passive that buffs technique of other voltage type cards, which isn't optimal. The first part of the event gacha gives us the best UR of the three, Pana 5, or as I like to call her, Hanayo Watson. A pure attribute SP type card, this card is easily one of the best SP gauge filled cards available, arguably better than Fest Emma. She sports an average base appeal for a gauge filler of 5266, decent base stamina at 4468, and a very nice 6224 base technique, giving her a 33.31% crit rate, which is very important. She can fill 8% of the SP gauge with her skill level 3 tap active, and her passive increases the technique of other pure attribute cards. This is very important because of her live show active, which is, if activated on her own crit taps, fill SP gauge by 1% of her own technique. When you take into consideration her very good technique stat that also gets a buff from her own passive, this card can single-handedly win you SP gauge MVPs on its own. If you pull this card, you essentially have pulled a budget Fess Emma. Unfortunately, the second part of the Gacha banner is significantly weaker. Kanata 3, or Phantom Thief Kanata, is a Smile attribute SK type that actually has a similar kit to that of Blue Amour Umi, or Umi 2. A relatively similar stat line to the Pana we just reviewed, this card comes in with 5320 base appeal, 4066 base stamina, and 6270 base technique, giving her a 33.44% crit rate. Her tap active and passive abilities are exactly that of Umi 2. A voltage gain increased tap active of a maximum 6.2% for the next 5 notes, and a maximum 7% appeal buff to the same strategy cards. Their only difference in their abilities is their live show actives, where Kanata is unfortunately much weaker in terms of overall impact. Where Umi has the increased appeal of all cards by 5% until the end of the live LSA, Kanata has a live show active that, if activated on her own taps, increases crit rate of all members by 5.5% for the next 5 notes, only activating at a 10% rate. In terms of usefulness as a frontline scorer, the only way I can see someone using her is if you haven't pulled any of the high value Smile scorers. As far as the Gacha SR goes, Koi Aqua Kanan is decent, but not a standout. Another Smile attribute, SK type card with middle of the road base stats, this Kanan provides a crit rate increase of a maximum of 15% for the next 3 notes for other cards in her strategy, activating at a 30% rate. Her passive only increases her own technique by a maximum of 7%, and her LSA doesn't really match the rest of her kit at all, as it provides an SP gauge gain if activated on one of her crit taps and only lasting for the next 3 notes. Next up on the calendar was the Spotlight Gacha, featuring the Violin Maki UR and the Love You My Friend Setsuna SR. Let's quickly talk about the Love You My Friend Setsuna SR, a natural attribute SK type card with a kit that's all over the place. She shares a strikingly similar stat line to the Koi Aqua Kanan we just talked about. Setsuna's tap active provides a crit rate increase as well, though hers is for a maximum of 7% for the next 10 notes. Her passive ability, for some reason, increases the stamina of other cards in her strategy by a maximum of 5%, and her live show active, if activated at the beginning of an appeal chance, increases appeal of all members by 4% over the next 10 notes. Now let's talk about the highlighted UR, Maki 5, Serenade or Violin Maki. A natural attribute SP type card with decent base appeal and stamina, but like the 4 other natural attribute SP type cards before her, sports a very high 68-62 base technique and a 35.18% crit rate. Her tap active is the first of its kind, a hybrid skill that combines both SP Gauge Fill and SP Gauge Bomb abilities. When activated at skill level 3, this Maki adds 4% to the SP gauge and will increase voltage from the next SP gauge by 18% of her technique, activating at a 33% rate. Her live show active, which activates upon AC completion, adds 8% of her technique to the SP gauge, activating at a 30% rate. Both of these abilities tie back to her passive, which is a technique buff to just herself by 8% at skill level 3. The jury is still out on this card when it comes to its overall effectiveness, but the fact that all of her abilities, which are based on her technique, line up with her high base technique stat already gives the card above average marks for me. I mean, come on, look at how adorable this Knuckles is. After the Spotlight Gacha began, we got to play through the second round of Dreamlight Parade. At this point, we still had a maximum of 30 songs, ending on Love You My Friends, so if you weren't able to finish Dreamlight Parade the first time around, you have an additional shot at completion here with a full reset on your card pool. This round, the girls that get the extra PP are the Muse girls. The marathon event for what would have been the month of December is the Mononoke Girl event, or Rina's Haunted House. The event cards are UR Ruby 5 or Mononoke Ruby, SR Koi Aqua Riko, and SR Love You My Friends Kasumi. The event Gacha URs are Rina 3 or Mononoke Girl Rina, Umi 5 or Mononoke Girl Umi, and the event Gacha SR is Wonderful Rush Kotori. This event was kind of insane on the JP server, as the first place player in event points scored just under 18 million points, and the top 100 cutoff was the second highest recorded, finishing just below the ice skating marathon event. For an event UR, Ruby 5 or Mononoke Girl Ruby is not all that bad. A decent stat line boasting 4886 base appeal, 3697 base stamina, and 6279 base technique at Limit Break 1, sporting a 33.47% crit rate as well. Her tap active is an SP Gauge Bomb, and luckily, it's based off of her highest stat, Technique, adding 29% of it to the next SP gauge and activating at a 33% rate. Her live show active is pretty useful if you're selling out on a high crit frontline, as if she activates it at the beginning of the live, will increase the value of crit taps for all members by 4% for the rest of the live. Her passive is the odd skill out, boosting her own stamina by a maximum of 9%. As for the event SRs, outside of raising their bond levels, I can't say anything particularly positive about either Koi Aqua Riko or Love You My Friends Kasumi. The Gacha SR is decent, especially in the context of wanting more quote useful cards for Dream Life Parade. Wonderful Rush Kotori is an elegant attribute guard type card with a stamina heal tap active, the first elegant SR with this tap active amazingly. Luckily for us, her full kit lines up with her highest base stat, her stamina. Her passive ability is a self-stamina buff by a maximum of 7%, and her LSA has a chance to generate a shield at the start of the AC, activating at a 40% rate. The Gacha URs are not too bad either. The first part of the Gacha gives us Rina's third UR, Mononoke Girl Rina, or Rina 3. A Smile attribute voltage type, the addition of this Rina into the game creates the Smile scoring triumvirate, joining Rin 2 and Pana 3 as the three best synergistic scores for the Smile attribute in the game at this point. Clocking in with a whopping 6574 base appeal at Limit Break 0, this Rina is far from a slouch. She also beats her other first year Smile counterparts when it comes to base stamina and technique at Limit Break 0, meaning if you're missing either Rin 2 or Pana 3, she makes an adequate substitute for the missing piece. Her tap active gives a voltage boost of 31% of her own appeal at skill level 3, but her passive ability increases the technique of other Smile attribute cards by 4.6% at skill level 3, bringing down the usefulness of the card just a bit. Her live show active is pretty interesting, as if activated on her own crit taps, increases the appeal of other Smile attribute cards by 9.5%, though only for the next 2 notes, meaning to fully maximize the card's value, you'd have to be fully on attribute when using her as a frontliner. The second part of the event Gacha gives us Mononoke Girl Umi, or Umi 5. An elegant attribute guard type, this card is just fine as a sustain card, though there are quite a few weak points to the card overall. Umi has a pretty low base appeal at Limit Break 0, coming in at 3511. Her base stamina, thankfully, is quite high at 7181, and her technique floats in at a respectable 5266. Having the standard stamina heal tap active, she gives you a nice sustain card, though it does come at the price of her lower base appeal, much like with Fest Ruby. Her passive is not the best, as she only increases the stamina of same strategy cards by 6% at skill level 3, and her live show active is dependent on strategy switching, which, unless you're running a switch cleanser, doesn't provide too much value in the larger context of the game. I'm okay with pulling this card, but I won't feel great about it either. Following Rina's haunted house, we get the story chapter 17 update. This is the part of the story that I believe helped accelerate the global schedule, so I am unsure if we will continue with the accelerated schedule after this. Before we continue, however, if you follow the in-game story and would like to avoid spoilers, please fast forward to the timestamp listed here. With the story chapter 17 update, we are given the attribute version of Kawariasuki, a new solo Ketsui no Hikari, and Tokimeki Runners, the chapter 17 version. First, let's talk about Tokimeki Runners and why it's getting a whole new version. The reason? Shioriko has now joined the school idol club, and Tokimeki Runners Chapter 17 version includes her, making the song a 10-member MV. The other difference is that this song is in the natural attribute as opposed to the smile attribute version of the 9-member Tokimeki Runners. The voltage threshold to S rank this song is 7.09 million, and it has a cleansable debuff of -20% appeal to off attribute cards. There are only 4 appeal chances, but all of them give a bonus to having Niji members in the strategy you use during the ACs. The first is a pretty hefty 118k SP gauge pop, so make sure your center 3 is optimized for maximum scoring. The second AC requires 8 skill activations and gives a base skill activation rate up to all Niji cards by 20%, so you may be forced into running a single Niji only strategy if you don't have a lot of on-attribute scores to help you power through the song. The third AC is another SP gauge pop, this time for 120k, but your Niji cards get a base appeal increase of 20% for it, so it should be a little easier than the first AC. The last AC requires 269k voltage and has the same intra-AC gimmick as the third, so it shouldn't be too tough if you have a lot of high-scoring cards. Next, let's go over the attribute version of Koare Yasuki. A cool attribute song, this song will severely punish you on several fronts. First, take a look at the damage per note. 1650. No, this is not a typo. Every note in this song hits ridiculously hard, so you will want to have your strongest healer or shielder as your main sustain card. The voltage requirement to S rank is relatively low at 5.83 million, but this is because for most people, there will be a decent amount of time spent in yellow stamina, so this helps offset that just a tad. There are gimmick notes within the song that do heal stamina based on the number of total guard cards you have in your team, making it similar to Koi ni Naritai Aquarium. The third and fifth appeal chances don't make the song any easier, as they reduce the base appeal of non-guard type cards by 50% during the AC, so unless you save your SP gauge, you may have trouble with clearing them. All of the other ACs do provide benefits though, as the second and last heal you for a percentage of your max stamina upon AC completion, and the first and fourth increase the appeal of other cool cards by 20%. A tip that I'll give to make the song a lot easier: if you have Yo1 or Bunny Rabbit Yo, put her in your backline. Her live show active recovers stamina anytime you take over 1k damage, so backlining her essentially turns every card you own into a possible heal chance. Finally, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, Ketsui no Hikari, Shioriko's solo. There are a lot of interesting parts to this song, so let's break all of them down. First, notice here the low damage per note, only 10. This means you can get away with running your 3 best scores in your main scoring strategy, which you will need because of the pain the appeal chances inflict. Voltage requirement to S rank this song is 6.47 million, and the song has a cleansable 20% appeal debuff to off attribute cards. The real problem from this song comes from the appeal chances. The first appeal chance deals 30k damage to you once the AC ends, the third deals 50k damage when it ends, and if you haven't died by this point, the last AC deals 80k damage when it ends. If most of you haven't figured this out by now, yes, you will need a lot of stamina sticks in your backline, preferably guard types. Why? Well, the second and fourth ACs require 7 and 8 skill activations respectively, while boosting base skill activation rate of guard type cards by 50% during the AC. So having a 3-member guard strategy is a must. In addition to the story chapter 17 update, we got the 9th Fest banner, featuring Daya and Shizuku. This Fest banner is not what I would call the strongest, but let me explain why I feel that way. Fest Shizuku, or Shizuku 3, is a cool attribute guard type card that has a shield tap active. Her base stats line up very well with Fest Ruby, as they share the same base stamina, but Shizuku has both lower base appeal and base technique than Fest Ruby. Her passive does provide more of a stamina buff to same attribute cards than Ruby, maxing out at 5.2%, and her LSA provides an appeal buff to all members by 3.5% for the next 5 notes upon AC completion. The overall kit of this card makes me view her similarly to Fess Maki, a very good stamina stick backliner, but only will see main strategy use if either you need a lot of shield or you don't require that much scoring out of your sustain slot. Fess Dia, or Dia 5, is a pure attribute SK type card with pretty good base stats. At Limit Break 0, she sports a base 6596 appeal, 3815 stamina, and 6954 technique, giving her a 35.45% crit rate, trailing only initial Hanamaru for the highest crit rate among pure attribute URs. Her entire kit revolves around other third years, however, which severely hamper team building possibilities with her. Her tap active gives a crit rate increase for other third years by 17% for the next 5 notes at skill level 3. Her passive increases appeal of other third years by 4.6% at skill level 3, and her live show active, if activated upon AC completion, increases voltage gain of other third years by 8% for only the next 5 notes, activating at a 50% rate. The fact that this card has the third year's focus kit really limits the optimal usage of the card, but it doesn't make it a bad card in the slightest. I could easily see her being used with Fess Emma and Fess Mari for an uber crazy crit plus gauge fill comp, or used with Noble Princess Karen and Initial Ellie for a third year's pure comp. Or, if worse comes to worse and you have to backline her, she will still fit the bill if you're running something like Fess Mari, Magical Time Nozomi, and Fess Kanata in your main scoring strategy. The SRs that come with the Fess banner are not that bad. Koi Aqua Yo is an elegant attribute voltage type SR with decent stats and can work well as a backliner in certain scenarios. The main highlight of this card is her passive, which increases the appeal of other voltage type cards by a maximum of 4.2% at max skill level, the same passive that Cheerleader Chica has. Wonderful Rush Nico, on the other hand, when I evaluate the kit of this card, basically has one very good case as a backliner. During SBL, if you run Fess Emma, her passive increases the technique of other natural attribute cards, and her live show active increases the SP gauge gain of other SP type cards by 8% for the next 30 notes upon switching strategies, though only activating once during the course of the live. I could easily see someone running a dual gauge fill composition with Fess Emma, Fess Ellie, and Train Nico in one strategy with the initial Yohane, Miracle Voyageo, and Event Pana in another, swapping back and forth to get as much fill from Fess Emma's live show active while trying to maximize the gauge gain you get from Nico's live show active. Everything from this point on will be under the speculation that we continue the events at an accelerated pace, so please keep that in mind. After the release of the Fess banner, we got the 4th official SBL, with Snow Halation, Kokoro Magic A to Z, and Diamond being the songs chosen. The stat bonuses this time around went to Niji cards, so plan accordingly. As always, I will be coming out with a separate video going over SBL, so be on the lookout for that. After SBL started, we got a special banner featuring all the Niji Fess cards. Unlike normal Fess banners, however, this banner gave a 4x rate up to all Niji Fess cards that were released before Fess Shizuku, as that card is not a part of this particular banner. The available Niji Fess cards, Ai, Kanata, Emma, Setsuna, and Karen, all had an individual 0.241% pull rate, which is less than half the chance you had to pull them when compared to the Fess banners they were on. If you're desperate to pull multiple Niji Fess cards, this banner is still pretty good for you. However, if you're looking to pull meta-defining cards and don't have enough to spark the banner, just save until Fess Kanon comes out. The final event we will talk about in this video is the Sports Battle event, featuring Event UR Setsuna 3, Event SR's Wonderful Rush Rin, and Koi Aqua Maru, Gacha UR's Mari 5 and Ellie 5, and Gacha SR Love You My Friends Rina. This event was on the low side in participation when it came to top 10 and top 100, dropping off significantly from the previous exchange event with Detective Yohane. For the event cards, well, let me just put it bluntly. The cards and their kits are not good. Both the event UR Setsuna and the event SR Wonderful Rush Rin have SP Gauge Game tap actives, which are not good in most cases, and while the event SR Koi Aqua Hanamaru does have an appeal boost tap active, the rest of her kit is all over the place. All in all, outside of grabbing these cards for bond levels and other general event drop farming, the cards aren't going to be very useful. The Gacha SR Love You My Friends Rina isn't too bad, as she gives a usable active attribute guard type for things like Dreamlife Parade. She's a shielder, granting a max 27% of her stamina as a shield. Her passive increases the stamina of other active attribute cards, and her live show active, if activated at the beginning of an appeal chance, recovers stamina equal to 20% of her own stamina. The same LSA as Honoka 1 and Yohane 2. The Gacha URs are actually pretty interesting. The first part of the Gacha gives Twilight Cowgirl Mari, a natural attribute SK type, clocking in with a base 5266 appeal, 3990 stamina, and 6703 technique. This is another heavy critter, with a 34.71% crit rate at Limit Break 0. She only trails Fess Emma, Fess Umi, and the recent Serenade Maki when it comes to natural attribute crit rate at Limit Break 0. Her Voltage Gain tap active and Appeal Plus passive both revolve around other Aqua cards, which does limit the card's flexibility. Her LSA does not, though, as if it is activated upon AC completion, will increase the crit rate of all members by 7.8% for the next 5 notes, activating at a 50% rate. A pretty interesting card, with art that is going to give Mari Oshis everywhere a heavy nosebleed. The second part of the event gacha gives us Queen of the Circuit Ellie, or Ellie5. A cool attribute voltage type, this card, much like the Mari in the first part of the event gacha, also has some restrictions that make this card less flexible than what would be considered ideal. First, her stats. Base 6703 appeal, 3511 stamina, 5745 technique, tail sliding in with a 16.9% crit rate at Limit Break 0. Her tap active is similar to Pana 3 and Fess Kanata, which gives an appeal boost that maxes out at 7.2%, but the restriction on this Ellie is that her tap active only increases the appeal of other cool cards. She shares a passive with Fess Daya, increasing the appeal of other third years by 4.6% at skill level 3, and her LSA, when activated upon AC completion, gives voltage equal to 35% of her appeal, activating at a 30% rate. This card does start with higher base stats than the 2 other non-Fess cool voltage cards, Nozo 3 and Yoho 4, but the restrictions on both her tap active and her passive balance that out. And with that, we conclude this very lengthy preview on the possible upcoming events for the month of November. Once again, thank you to Xifrid for help with some of the visual assets for this video. As always, if you enjoyed this video and would like to support my work, share this video, subscribe for free here on YouTube, follow me for free on Twitch over at twitch.tv/IamTheShaz, and join my Twitch channel Discord. Links will be in the description below. If my Twitch and or YouTube content is worthy enough and you would like to support monetarily, you can subscribe to or give bits on my Twitch channel. It is never required of you as a viewer, but always greatly appreciated. Finally, a big thanks to my Twitch subs, SIFAS, 86 Romy, Mino Mone, Shut It, Poker Dottie, AJ Bailey 3, Kotaro-chan, JMSYNR, Medir Cutie, and Super Penguin 7, most of whom have gifted subs in the channel as well. I've been I Am The Shaz, take it easy, be nice to each other, and I'll see you all next time.